Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alexis and today I'm going to be sharing my top 10 reads of 2022. I am also going to be sharing 3 honorable mentions, so I guess you could call this the top 13, but top 10 just sounds better. All in all, I had a good time. All of these I still ranked 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, but if I am to set them somewhere, the honorable mentions were easier to, negotiate the ranking. So we're going to start off with King of Wrath by Huang. This is her latest release. It is the first book in her new series, I believe Kings of Sins. There are set to be 7 books. The second one, King of Pride, is scheduled to come out later this year. If you want to know the exact date, definitely check out my 2023 new releases video. That should be the first one you see on my channel. But as for King of Wrath, this is between Dante and Vivian. It is a contemporary romance. It is a marriage of convenience. There's blackmail involved, somewhat betrayal, I guess you could call it that, but definitely a little bit of miscommunication about what's actually going on. So essentially, Dante is being blackmailed by Vivian's father for reasons that are to be revealed in the book, and he has to marry Vivian for convenience in order to avoid said blackmail information to be leaked. And as for Vivian, she is already in her later 20s. Her strict family has these expectations for her, and she's listening because she doesn't feel like there's anything else to do, because she already has this level of expectation with her family, and she already maintains this persona around her family. She'll change her clothes, what she wears, maybe how she talks, things like that. This is also a contemporary romance. Dante is a sexy billionaire. Vivian is a sexy heiress. We love that for her. But yes, this one I really enjoyed. Can't say I top it over the Twisted series. I will be sharing another book from that series as well in my top 10, but before we get into that, as for Dante and Vivian, they are just so sweet in the little things that they would do for each other. So Dante would, of course, take her out and about. He would try to resist her. They, of course, had to fake date and do their proposal and such, because they had to maintain this idea that it was actually a love match to the public, whereas of course behind closed doors they didn't really seem to care for each other, at least on Dante's end. He really wanted to maintain this wall, this distance between himself and his enemy's daughter, but of course that didn't happen. Some of my favorite moments, they include eating snacks together in the middle of the night. Strange snacks. There were some that people even tried. I thought that was interesting on TikTok. Some other readers ended up trying those snacks. I have yet to do so, but if you read it, you'll know what I'm talking about. Something mixed with ice cream and soy sauce and pickles and Pringles and, all that enchilada. Just not for me. Not yet. Anyway, I have yet to try that. How soon is questionable, if at all. Also questionable. But yes, this one I really enjoyed. All in all, this is my favorite honorable mention. The next honorable mention that I have here is Stolen Heir by Sophie Lark. This is the second book in the Brutal Birthright series. It is a contemporary romance, mafia romance, Beauty and the Beast trope. There is kidnapping in here as implied by the Beauty and the Beast trope. So captor captive and tattooed hero. Of course, mafia romances tend to imply some level of violence, maybe even death. This one definitely had both, but I could forgive our hero. This essentially follows Miko and Nessa. Miko is of, I believe, the Polish mafia, if I remember correctly. He is beautifully tattooed. I love the descriptions. There are illustrated versions of these covers, but I just preferred the male editions first. I'm not sure if I will get the illustrated versions. I haven't decided yet. But essentially, Miko was brought into the mafia lifestyle because of something that happened to his sister, and he was initially seeking revenge on her behalf. But once he enters the world. He ends up impressing one of the leaders, one of the bosses, and they take him under his wing. And after, of course, a few years, this does follow the events of Brutal Prince, which is the first book of the series. That one, personally, I gave it 3 stars, so but I do think it is necessary to read it before going into this. Technically, this can be read as a standalone, but just to get more of a understanding of the other characters in the book, it's just best to start the first one. And like I said, it's only one book before this, so it's really not a hardship, in my opinion. If it were later in the series, maybe you want to take your time. But this, it was very digestible. Really enjoyed it. Just and something about Beauty and the Beast retellings, I noticed that trend going on as I was trying to sort my top 10s, and most of my 5 stars ended up being some level of captor, captive, Beauty and the Beast, one's grump, one's more sunshine-esque characters. So yeah, this one I really enjoyed, and Miko is definitely the type of person to get his revenge, but the negotiation in the end, because of course Nessa is the child of one of his enemy mafia families. So yeah, all in all, this is great. And the tattoos meaning, love it. Nessa is a ballet dancer. And unfortunately, I can't seem to find a page with it, but Sophie Lark does tend to get more experimental with her books. She does incorporate the name of songs for certain sections for the reader to listen to, so it makes it more cinematic, for lack of a better term, and theatrical. I love that. I did end up getting the signed edition on her website because, well, honestly, they weren't going to be available anymore on Amazon. But this is definitely my favorite in the series. However, Bloody Heart is a close second, and the 5th and 3rd book probably would follow after that. But yes, this one, wonderful. My 3rd honorable mention would be When the Marquess Falls, and that is by Lorraine Heath. I did read this using an ebook, so I unfortunately don't have a physical copy. I only have a physical copy of the first book, but I am planning on parting with that, so feel free to check out my Pangos link in the description box down below. It is still available. But essentially, this is a novella at the end of the series for the Hillians of Havisham series. This follows George and Lynn. They are the parents of one of the heroes from the other books. Unfortunately, it escapes my mind right now, but it's about the parents, and it's about before he was even born. So we already know from the main 3 books in the series that Lynn did already pass from childbirth. George, of course, misses her because she was the love of his life, and he just can't let her go. I thought this was a really sweet twist to the romance book. It does have a happily ever after. They are reunited, but of course you can understand where I'm going with this, how it's implied. It does start with them as children. They are from different classes. She is of the lower class and he is of the titled class. So he is a Marquess. And yeah, this one was just a really sweet book. I did end up crying, even though it is a little shorter than, of course, main novels, like I said. I think this would be considered a novella, but again, I don't have the physical book, so I couldn't tell you how long it actually is. This one's really enjoyable. Of course, historical romance. There is death involved. But yeah, this first top 10 book I read in January, and I read again sometime in the winter. I want to say November, but maybe it was December. And that would be Yours Until Dawn by Teresa Medieros. We can appreciate a lovely shiny cover and a beautiful step back. This is not the edition I first read, to be honest, because the other edition I had, you can see it in the January video, it in fact had the Target sticker and the spine was more broken because I had read through it already. But this one I was able to obtain a nice copy because I bought an eBay lot for Teresa Medieros books, and this was one of them, so I was able to get a nice replacement, and I did already resell my duplicate because someone else can enjoy it as much as I did. This is my favorite historical romance probably to date by now because it does include Beauty and the Beast retelling in here, caregiving, of course. This does have also a threading message throughout. You would just have to read it to understand, because honestly I can't talk about it without really spilling some secrets. This follows Gabriel and Samantha. We are first introduced to Samantha. She's being interviewed to be the nanny for Gabriel. Gabriel was injured in war and he was blinded, so he just has difficulty moving on and getting on with his life, a reason to live, and she gives that to him and she helps him have more clarity about what is more to life. I really appreciated this. There were times, of course, that they had confrontation, but then when something happens, Samantha, of course, is there for him. They also have dinner together, so again, Beauty and the Beast elements, eating together, sharing food, showing him etiquette, proper etiquette. There's also a mystery underlining throughout the thing. Gabriel was left by his fiance, and he just had no purpose at the time when he first met Samantha, and Samantha has her own reasons for being there. So maybe you'll figure it out, maybe you won't. I certainly didn't. I went in blind, and I'm so glad I wasn't told about this beforehand. I found it myself, and there's just something that added to the experience of not knowing what I was getting myself into. I was purely just enjoying it because of the cover, and the synopsis, of course, gives a little tidbit of what I just said as well. All in all, I found this on my own, and the experience just enhanced that much more for me. 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely would return to it again. I read it physically the first time. The second time I used ebook on my library because I am not going to disrupt this beautiful copy that I was able to get my hands on. It's like new. It's first edition. Just no, I am never parting with this. Know that for sure. Now, the next book that I have here is Twisted Hate. As you can see, I have the lovely out of print male copy edition. I'm so glad I found this author before they went away because, man, how often do we get to see a beautiful man on the cover? How often do we get to see an Asian on the cover? Just let that simmer in here. I'm really bothered that these are out of print for other people because, you know, some of us still want our men. Some of us still want them to bask in all their glory on the cover because we don't see enough representation. But yes, this model, fine, perfect pick for Josh. Essentially, Twisted Hate is the third book in the Twisted series. First book is Twisted Love, next one's Twisted Games, and then this. We are first introduced to Josh and Jules in Twisted Love. In Twisted Love, that follows Ava and Alex. Ava is the sister of Josh. Alex is the best friend of Josh. And Jules is the best friend of Ava, or one of the 3 best friends. Each book follows another girl best friend. And Jules and Josh hate each other. It is revealed why they hate each other in this book. You will not know from the previous books, but it is also hinted at throughout the series, their playful banter. I was looking forward to them since book 1. I already knew. I mean, it's also fairly obvious who they're going to be paired up with between Josh and Jules. You already knew once they were introduced that it was going to be angsty. It was going to be spicy. This is considered the spiciest book of the series as well. And I will say that it is thicker than Twisted Love and Twisted Games. However, it does not beat Twisted Lies in terms of thickness. However, I do think the storytelling in this one was better for me because Twisted Lies is a slow burn, and I'm not a fan of slow burns. I'm not that girl. It was good for most of it, but at the end of the day, Josh is my man. He's my doctor. I'd want him to treat me for sure. Josh and Jules are a power couple. Jules is pursuing a lawyer career status, and Josh is a doctor. They do end up working together within a type of clinic, I believe it was. After the events of Twisted Love, Josh is kind of not trusting of Alex, and he's still feeling kind of distant in terms of his life because of things that happened in Twisted Love. So again, for a better understanding, you gotta read the previous books, but I'm telling you, it is worth it. This is my favorite of the series. Of course, they do have a fallout between Josh and Jules toward the end, but what book does not have a third act conflict? I mean, that's how most books are. But essentially, in the beginning of the book, they still hate each other. They even went on a ski trip, but Josh was very helpful when Jules was having some issues in terms of health. And they do end up working together, as I said. They end up having, pretty intense, steamy time. And then after that, Josh is the one to propose, like, hey, you and me, we didn't expect it, and I still loathe you, but we had a good time. So let's have some more good times together. And that's essentially how they start. There is also some cute dates in here. There's some element of mysterious past to Jules. There is, of course, a breakup like that. Ooh, a lot of people, and understandably so, got upset, but I forgave my man. I was okay. He definitely had his own flaws that are forgivable, in my opinion. If you disagree, do not come for me in the comments because I will stand by my man regardless. But yeah, they are my favorite couple. Jules is described to be like a Jessica Rabbit live version, and of course Josh is Chinese descent. And yeah, I just love their playful, interracial, contemporary, spicy romance. So yes, favorite in the series. Okay, this next one I did end up reading through KU. I believe it's still available on there, and that is Blidesided by Amy Daws. This follows Mac and Freya. I will admit, I did kind of forget the names, but I did not forget the events. So, all I had to do, looking at the review, is just check their names, because that would be between Mac and Freya. Mac is a soccer player, or should I say football player. He is Scottish hero. Freya is another European hero, but I forget what country she's from. This is a contemporary romance, sports romance as implied. This is a friends to lovers moment. We have a curvy female main character in Freya. This is just such a sweet story, and also I did tear up for this as well because of why they were parted for a little bit. Mac and Freya did meet maybe a couple years back. They became friends. It was to Freya unlikely because she never thought she would be someone who was close to a well-known professional soccer player, whereas Mac, he always treated her fairly. He was clearly attracted to her. He called her Bonnie. Like, imagine that in a Scottish accent. It's just, it's one of the more lovely endearments, if not my favorite. But yes, it's just, it is so sweet. This one is more lighthearted compared to some of the other books on this list, but essentially this is just a good time. This is technically part of a series, but I did read it on its own because honestly I didn't have any interest in the other books, and I still have yet to have interest in the other books, but never say never. That's all I have to say about Blidesided. I do have a full review on Goodreads, but feel free to check that out. This does include some family dynamics that are really close, and it gets heavy toward the end for sure. But the comeback, the makeup, everything, it was worth it. Well worth it. I enjoyed this one. The next book I have is Love and War by Shirrá Lynn. I want to say Shirrá Lynn. But this is a modern historical romance. This is a black woman, white man romance, so interracial. This does take place during World War II, not before, not after, but during. It does follow a French black singer along with a German and unfortunately Nazi doctor. Emil was forced into being a Nazi by his father for his own gain, and Emil didn't want to contribute, so I will say that some people might find it uncomfortable to read about, but honestly, I thought it was pretty realistic adaptation. Uh, Obviously, it is fictitious. This did remind me of a movie where hands touch. I will put an image here. I did enjoy that. However, this does not have an ending I'm happy with, whereas this one does. This is between Victoria and Emil. Emil was forced into being a Nazi doctor by his German father because his father was devoted, a very devoted Nazi, and Emil didn't want any part of that, but of course, for reasons, he is forced into it. Whereas Victoria, she is a black woman in Europe, and around that time, of course, people of color were also targeted as well as Jews and people who were identified as LGBT as well. This book does obviously draw attention to those heavier topics, but essentially, Victoria, when she was going to be taken away, Emil was able to save her and stop her from being taken by claiming that she is his housekeeper. And this does end up being close proximity because, of course, in order to maintain the lie, she had to go with him. She does end up getting separated from her loved ones because of the war, as again is also realistic. And there are some repercussions in here. There is definitely some heavy topics in here in terms of like physical things from other person that Emil, of course, got jealous and wanted to protect her, but because of their situation, there are just some things that he can't protect her from, and vice versa, she cannot protect him from the things that he is forced to do. This does also include Emil's best friend and his love interest. It was just a really endearing story, and it is one of love and war, so you kind of don't know what to expect as you go through, but again, because it's a romance and because it's on my top 10, obviously it has a happily ever after for this couple. This one, very enjoyable and stunning cover. This is a debut novel as well. I know there is another book. I have it available on my Hoopla. I've yet to read it, but yeah, this one, she ain't that thick, but text is, I guess, fairly small. I really enjoyed it. I have here A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Vane. This is my first adult fantasy romance, and I am so glad I enjoyed it. I first heard about this from Jess from the Book Refuge, and bro, could go no wrong. This follows Matic and Evane. I love that name from the Stardust movie inspired by the Neil book. But essentially, this one follows Matic and Evane. Matic, after the murder of his parents, and no, that is not a spoiler, it happens very early in the book, he decides to seek revenge against his enemy, and in doing so, intercepting his daughter and killing her. So his intentions when he meets Vane is to kill her, but then upon meeting, he is, stunned to see that this is in fact, although she appears to be fragile, is a very strong-minded, intelligent woman. And Evane, on her end, she doesn't care for her father. She, in fact, also has her own agenda against him and says, hey, since you and I have the same enemy, why don't we just become allies? And, I could do what I can to help you get close to my father. And, Matic doesn't seem to believe her at first, but of course, throughout the book, he does fall for her. This is, of course, close proximity fantasy. This does include elements of magic as well. It is in the Gathering of Dragons series. This is the first book. The second book I have yet to complete. That is more of a slow burn, but this one is definitely not a slow burn. This is a nice build up, and as you can see, I did tab it quite a bit through. This, of course, does include a level of violence, and this does also cause some heartache toward the end. But again, a nice redemption, a beautiful reunion. Love, love, love. Okay, another historical romance I have is The Highlander by Kerrigan Byrne. This is a book in the Victorian Rebel series. I believe it is the fourth one, but they can be read as standalones. This follows Philomena and Liam. Philomena goes by Mina in the book. And essentially, Mina had a husband who was physically cruel to her, very abusive. He ended up putting her in an asylum. But Mina, she is rescued by other Victorian rebel heroes in the series. I do think they should be read in order, but again, it can be read as a standalone. It's not required to read the other books. You'll just have a better understanding. And maybe even if you start with this one, you'll be inclined to read the other books because they are connected, but they don't have to be read together, if that makes sense. It's just a level of world building, and it also overlaps with the Good Girls series. But Mina, on her end, she was in an asylum, and after she's rescued by another hero in the book, she is sent away for her protection and into the Highlands. That is where she meets Liam. They first meet when she is stuck in a carriage, and he comes to rescue her. She is a plus size heroine. We love curvy girls. She's tall, and he also thinks she is quite bonny. I love that. He is a single dad. His first wife had already passed away. He does have a brother who is in the book that follows this, but I don't enjoy as much as this one for sure. This one is one of my favorite, if not the favorite in the series. And Liam, he, on his end, is somewhat suppressing his feelings toward Mina. He does have 2 grown children, but of course, when he sees their interactions, he can't help but think that's endearing. They do have their own playful interactions as well. She ends up giving them lessons, the children, on etiquette because they had yet to have that experience, and Liam was away for a period of time. His father was an abusive man and is mentioned in another book as well, because Liam does have several brothers, and like I said, another book follows another brother, Gareth. But yeah, this one really enjoy. Also, aside from the carriage moment, there are times when he obviously worries for her, but he doesn't realize her past. And when he does, he just can't help but be angry and upset on her behalf and want to, comfort her. So, yeah, I don't even know if I would call this a slow burn because of how long it took them to get together. But the build-up again was so well done that I didn't even notice until I was checking pages. And I wasn't really checking pages. I was more concerned about the story. So if that doesn't tell you anything, I don't know what else to. Okay, this one, it just happens to be green. I will say that, but that is terms and conditions. I just happen to be matching this. This was not intentional. But this is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaire series by Lauren Asher. This is superior to the first one, and that is the fine print. Each book, there are going to be 3. The third one is expected to come out later this year. If you want to see when that new release is, definitely check out my video. But this follows Declan and Iris. Declan is the eldest of 3 brothers. The 3 brothers were first introduced in the fine print, which is the first book. That is already out, of course. Essentially, the 3 brothers were prompted by their late grandfather that in order to inherit their part of the Disney equivalent theme park that is their family business, they have to complete these certain tasks. And one of the tasks for Declan is to get married and settle down before he can become, I believe, the CEO of the company. He is very independent. He doesn't feel the need to have a relationship or He doesn't feel like that is something that will be part of his life. This is, of course, a contemporary romance, a Disney-inspired romance. This is a billionaire romance, and it is an interracial romance. I appreciate the fact that Iris was, although there is an age gap, she is not afraid to put her foot down to Declan. But, of course, because Declan is so put off and haunted by his past relationship, especially with his father, he does push her away, and sometimes it can be really cruel. But I did enjoy some moments of when they got married and the unexpected spark between them. There is the moment when he's helping her get out of the dress, but nothing happens. It's just the tension. You sense it. And just coming home to each other. I feel like people who enjoy billionaire romances and already have a love of the Disney World theme park, they would definitely enjoy this. Although I am a big fan of Disney, I'm not too crazy about the park, but I will say I loved Pandora when I went there. I was there for my senior trip. So if that doesn't tell you, can't recommend it enough. The next book I have to talk about is Heartless by Elsie Silver. You may have seen this blow up a little bit more on TikTok for sure. It's a small town romance, contemporary romance, single dad romance. There is age gap in here. This book follows Cade and Willa. Cade, the single dad, is pretty much looking out for a nanny for his son Luke. But however, all of the ones that are being interviewed don't meet his standards, so he decides to tell his, I believe, already sister-in-law or soon-to-be sister-in-law, Summer from the first book, Flawless, that, hey, you know what? How about you do it? Find me a nanny, and I'm just going to run with that. So in comes Willa. Willa is the best friend of Summer from the first book, Flawless. And Willa, she is, of course, younger than Cade, but she has her own ground. She's definitely a lioness personality person. You'll understand when you get into the book, but I loved her interactions with Luke. Luke is the most precious child in the series, or at least the first one introduced anyway. And it's just, it's so sweet. The family dynamics are incredible. Yeah, I just don't really care for conversation about horses, and I'm really glad this did not have that. This was definitely more about the romance and the family dynamics, Willa being a maternal figure for Luke, and them coming together, Cade always being attracted to her. Even their first meeting was in a coffee shop, and Willa dropped something that was very personal out of her bag. Cade, of course, picks it up to be a gentleman and give back to her, but she responds, finders keepers, and lets him keep said personal item. You, again, have to read it in order to understand what I'm talking about, but man, she is bold. And she knew once it left her lips that maybe she would regret it, but she just, walked away with a smile. And Cade, from that moment on, he could not get her out of his head. Little does he know, shortly thereafter, Willa is the one that Summer had hired. So I was like, oh, it's you. Close proximity. He didn't want her hired at first, but then he decided to give her a chance. She turned out to be the best thing that happened to him and Luke. So, beautiful thing, beautiful thing. And of course, Luke's biological mother does get involved, but she's not the one. She may have given birth, but she's not the mother. Now, this book, it already has its own video as well. It was my most anticipated release of 2022. I devoured it within 24 hours because I could just not put it down. And that is Before I Let Go. As you can see, it has beautiful foiling. I do have the hard copy of this as well, but I'm not going to show that for now. And I did get the special art that came with it. I did get signed. And I'm just really excited for Kennedy Ryan. She is also going to be in New York, February the 4th, I believe, for a book talk event hosted by Barnes & Nobles. Unfortunately, that did sell out within 24 hours, and I did not get a ticket, although I could have. But in hindsight, it wouldn't make sense for me to go because there are only two of the four authors that I'm even interested in going for. And on top of that, I've never been to a signing, let alone by myself, so I'm not trying to stress myself out. And they sold out really quick, so it's just not my time yet to meet her. But this follows Yasmin and Josiah. This is, of course, contemporary romance. This is a divorced couple romance that is second chance. They do have a couple children. I believe one is 10 years old. The other one is already in high school. They daughter and son, and they do experience loss in here. This is mental health representation as well. So after experiencing heavy losses in the family, that is when Yasmin and Josiah end up getting divorced. And this is already going in 2 years after their divorce. It seems Josiah is starting to try to date, whereas neither of them are even interested in other people yet. But he's just testing the waters, right? And you already know that there is that person he's trying to move on with. And the thing is, the one he ends up trying to move on with, isn't even a bad person, but she's not the one I was rooting for by any means. Like, she may be a good person, but she's not the one I was rooting for. So Yasmin, she is, of course, a mother who experienced a heavy loss, and she's the one who decides to seek mental therapy because of the events that had happened to the family. And Josiah, he on his end did not understand it when it first started to be addressed. He definitely had the stoic mentality of, I can be the man in the house, I can handle it myself. But of course, we love a man who has growth throughout the book. And by the end of the book, he is definitely one to be understanding about mental health rap. Because of things that are happening for their children, that is when Josiah finally decides to even be open to the idea of therapy. And of course, this opens discussion for him and Yasmin to even have, because again, even before they got divorced, Yasmin wanted to go to therapy together. He was not inclined to the idea at all. And that is one of the contributing factors that eventually led to their divorce. But Yasmin definitely did her fair share of things not to help the situation. And they acknowledge it. They just weren't understanding of each other's level of grief. And yeah, so as you can see, this is a stunning cover. It is a Black love romance. There are two of Yasmin's best friends that are also going to be getting their books. They aren't expected to continue until 2024, though. This one did just release in November of 2022. The next one isn't scheduled till 2024, and I believe after that it'll probably be 2026. So every 2 years are these being released. It's a wonderful book. It's a shame it wasn't on Goodreads. It's a crime, in fact. This made me cry. As you can see, I was having mixed emotions, but in here it's a good thing. Sometimes I tend to, fluctuate in terms of, or label in terms of things that made me really sad, or things that made me really happy, or things that just didn't work for me. But trust and believe, all these mixed tabs mean that is just how my emotions were going. A roller coaster, just like the way this relationship was, because of the events. And when they both start trying to see other people, but obviously they can't get out of each other's heads, and you know that they are just destined for each other. They are soulmates, and that is something that Kenny B. Ryan does really well. Second chances, and they may take years. Sometimes they even take decades, but in here it took 2 years for them to find each other again. And it's just a beautiful book. Highly recommend. Can't get enough. I definitely see myself rereading it. Stunning. Just stunning. And the last 5-star book of 2022 that I have is Mile High by Liz Tomforde. I will say I did initially find this because of the love librarian Caitlin, and she talked about it on her Instagram. She of course mentioned it on her YouTube channel, so definitely check her channel out. But essentially this follows Xander's and Stevie. This is a contemporary romance. It is a hockey romance. It is a forbidden romance because Stevie is the flight attendant of Xander's hockey team, and they are contracted for the season. So, of course, close proximity throughout the season. And this is a multiracial romance as well. Xander's is described to be brown, whereas Stevie is a beautiful, curvy, black and white character. This does address some parental neglect as well. This addresses verbal abuse in terms of fat phobia from said relatives, which can be pretty traumatic. And Stevie does have a sibling in Ryan, a twin. He will be getting his book later this year. Again, that is one of my new releases that I'm looking forward to. I have yet to decide if I'm even going to get the alternate cover or the model cover for these books, because I know I'm going to get them. It was just so good, and I've been listening in on some of the author's live shows talking about the books. She does have her own experience as a flight attendant for a hockey team as well, so I thought that was interesting, doing her own twist on it. It's definitely spicy. Xander's is just so endearing, and he loves Stevie's curves. There's also dogs in here. I love dogs. Stevie is a volunteer in a dog shelter, and Xander's just loves to see that side of her. He is also the non-biological uncle to a little girl and is best friends with another hockey player who also has his own book, Madison and Logan. I have yet to read their books, but I'm hoping to get to them. However, the author is working on trying to get the rights back for those books, so I'm kind of holding out before I get to them. They are still available on Amazon right now, but again, she is working on getting the rights for those. Yeah, so this one is just a really endearing book. They did share a mutual attraction, but Xander's, on his end, would kind of like to mess with her, especially after their first meeting, because they didn't hit it off. Xander's and Stevie had a little misunderstanding, but after that, he just can't help but want to mess with her, and at the end of the day, he can't help but realize she's the one starting to get under his skin as well, and in the best way possible. They do end up having a one-time only, and then after that, Xander's like, hey, I kind of want more than this, and Stevie is more distant, trying to be like, you know what, I've been through this already. She had a cruel ex who didn't treat her nicely. In fact, Stevie was used to people trying to get to her in order to get closer to her brother. Her brother Ryan is a professional basketball player. His story is going to come out later this year in February. It is going to follow Ryan and Stevie's friend Indy. Indy is also someone who is a flight attendant person, but they will end up moving in together, so I'm looking forward to their book. Mile High does also have a playlist. Immediately after reading the book, I listened to it, and let me tell you, every song fits perfectly. I've never found or listened to a book playlist that was so in sync with the story, with the characters, and it just, every single song I knew, I could just check boxes on what it was referring to for the characters, and it was a beautiful thing, beautiful experience. This is a new-ish release. It did just come out last year as well, but definitely check it out. It is my last 5-star read of 2022, and you know, it's still in my head. I can't wait for the next one, which is The Right Move. So, and those are all the books that made my top 10 of 2022. Let me know in the comments down below. Did any of these make your list, or do you have other things that are different? Until next time, again, my name is Alexis. Take care and happy reading.